All right. As you all know, our studio has a big release this year. I want Wizard Kids 3, Wizards in Space, to crush the box office, which means I need big ideas to sell this joint. Andre, what do you got?
I was thinking that we could do another toy line.
Yeah, that's good. But what if we took it a step further and gave Joey a little alien sidekick?
They're already halfway through principal photography. I think it's a bit late to be adding characters.
Do I look like I care? Just have the VFX guys add it in post. Oh, and instead of cute and cuddly, let's do goofy and ugly this time. Like a little frog guy that bumbles around like an idiot. And give him an accent too. Like borderline offensive. I want people talking about this movie for decades. Michael, you're up. Talk to me.
I was thinking, what if we did collectible cards of characters and scenes from the movie?
I like that. Baseball cards are timeless, so every movie should have its own trading cards too. There's no shot that they're gonna end up shoved in some shoebox of their parents' dusty old attic.
Exactly.
All right, new guy. Wow me.
Jerry, sir. Home game consoles have been getting really popular lately. So I was thinking, what if we gave the audience a way to experience the movie from the comfort of their own home?
Jerry, stop right there. That is the single greatest idea I have ever heard. Are you kidding me? A movie video game? The kids are gonna eat that up. Andre, get Atari on the phone. That's gonna change everything, Jerry. Movie games are the future.
Whatever happened to movie games? I'm not talking about movies based on games. Those are actually doing really well. In the last 10 years, we've gotten a ton of really solid film and TV adaptations of famous gaming franchises like Arcane, Fallout, Sonic, and The Last of Us. It seems like we may be finally entering a golden age of game adaptations on screen. But no, I'm talking about the officially licensed game adaptations of feature films. Games that aren't just loosely inspired by film franchises or retrospective love letters to a series, but instead games that were built entirely, both in marketing and in-game story, around a movie currently or soon to be in theaters. They were a staple on game store shelves everywhere prior to the 2010s, and odds are a vast majority of gamers from that time had some form of experience with movie games. But it seems like nowadays they're just gone. Where did they go? Gaming is more popular now than ever, and with social media and content creation, I probably consume more video game related media in a single day than I did in an entire month as a kid, yet I never hear about new movie games coming out anymore. And that's extra weird considering the amount of blockbuster mega franchises and flashy reboots with seemingly bottomless budgets that we keep receiving. Did Hollywood just stop giving a shit about video games? Did one too many movie games bomb and now they won't make them anymore? Or did something more corporate friendly take their place? I was curious, so I wanted to dig into the history of movie games and try to figure out what exactly happened to this lost genre. Are they really gone? Or did they just become something else? Let's start by looking at the history of movie games. According to Guinness World Records, the first movie video game was actually 1982's Raiders of the Lost Ark for the Atari 2600. It was a simple 8-bit adventure game where you play the role of Indiana Jones, collecting items and treasure while navigating traps in search of the Ark of the Covenant. It's a far cry from the Indiana Jones game that we got this year, which was actually shockingly great. But nonetheless, the Raiders game made an honest attempt at giving fans their first real chance at living out their fantasies of their favorite movies. You could also argue that 1978's Superman game could be considered the first movie tie-in game, since it was made to capitalize on the success of the film. But unlike Raiders, Superman wasn't an adaptation of the film, and you weren't playing out any scenes directly from it. You were just kind of flying around, saving people, and trying to fix a bridge, I think. Whichever you consider to be first, this kickstarted the trend of video game adaptations of feature films. And ever since those early days of home consoles, movies and games have had an interconnected relationship, which makes a lot of sense if you think about it. As technology evolves, so do our approaches to storytelling as we develop new mediums. Why are film and TV adaptations of books so popular? because it lets us see our favorite stories come to life. And video games take that a step further by letting us be an active part of our favorite stories, meet our favorite characters, and live in those worlds. They also make a lot of sense as a marketing tool, especially with kids. What kid wouldn't want to get to play as their favorite character and relive the movie they just saw firsthand? The movie sold the game for them. And it works in reverse, too. Anytime a kid would run to the game aisle of a store, they'd see the box art that was often just the movie's poster, cementing the film's imagery in their mind. And if they got the game, it built familiarity with the characters and the brand, so they'd want to see the movie more. What's that word that corporate chills like to use in their LinkedIn posts? Synergy. Growing up in the late 90s and early 2000s, I remember seeing movie games all over the place. From Ghostbusters to Pixar's Cars, The Matrix, Lord of the Rings, Avatar, other Avatar. It seemed like any blockbuster franchise and or animated kids movie had a game version, and everyone seemed to own at least one. They were typically cheaper than AAA games and easy wins for parents and grandparents who maybe didn't know what a Zelda or a Halo was, but they remembered that you liked the movie about the chunky green man with the weird ears who yelled a lot.
Hear the roar.
Having a movie game in your collection was almost a rite of passage. Just off the top of my head, I personally remember owning The Lion King and Toy Story on the Sega Genesis, Toy Story 2 on the PC, Finding Nemo, Spider-Man 2, and Shrek 2 for the GameCube, the first Harry Potter game on the Game Boy, and both versions of the Transformers movie game on the Nintendo DS, which was another shockingly decent game, especially considering the hardware at the time. And don't get me started on the various other movie games that we'd rent down at the Family Video, or I'd play over at friends' houses. But if movie games were such a big part of gaming history, what happened to them? Before going further down this rabbit hole, I had to confirm that I wasn't just being oblivious, that movie games were in fact going extinct. Hell, maybe it's just my shopping habits. I'm a more discerning customer as an adult, and the vast majority of my game purchases are made digitally on platforms like Steam, where the homepage is dominated by whatever trending title or AAA game is popping off this week. And everything else I see is algorithmically curated based on my shopping habits and interests. Since there's so many titles on eShops, it makes sense that I'd never even see a new movie game release if it wasn't already popular and aligned with my interests. Whereas shopping at a brick and mortar store forces you to pick from a more limited inventory, so you might see something you otherwise would never even consider, like a movie game based on a currently in theaters film. So in order to get the full picture of the state of movie games, I knew what I had to do. I put on pants, I steeled my will, and I went where no gamer dares to go unless absolutely necessary. Outside. All right, we're gonna start with GameStop and see if they've got anything. Because if they don't have anything, I probably could just hang it up right here. I don't expect this to go well. I figured starting at a proper game store would be my best bet at finding some sort of movie game. Unfortunately, though, I was wrong. Lots of first-party titles and AAA releases, but the closest that I got to a game based on a movie was this Jumanji game for the Nintendo Switch. All right, one store down. I had a nice chat with an employee in there who pretty much agreed with me. These games have just vanished. I did discover a Jumanji movie game that I didn't know came out. But besides that, that was it. That was the only one that I saw. Indiana Jones, but no movie adaptations directly. Let's check a couple of the department store type deals and see what they have in their games aisles. So I hit a couple different department stores in hopes that maybe they'd have some older stock that included movie games, but no dice. The first store's Xbox and PlayStation collection was tiny and mostly just accessories. The Nintendo Switch section wasn't much better, just first-party Nintendo titles and more Switch accessories. The next store at least had more game options, but were just as empty when it came to games based on movies. Just more first-party titles and recent releases to pick from. I did manage to find a copy of Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, but that was about the best I was gonna do. At this point, it was pretty clear I wasn't gonna find much, so I decided to pack it up and head home. Okay, so I wasn't crazy. In the year 2025, movie games are nowhere to be seen in stores. But what about in general? maybe they've just gone digital. I found this handy dandy Wikipedia list of video games based on films, and after sorting each section by descending year, I noticed something weird. There is a stark drop-off in movie games after 2012 to 2013. And most of the games that were released after that point aren't actually based on films, but rather franchises overall. So what happened? It seems like the industry just collectively decided to pack it up and stop adapting movies into games one day. Why? Well, the answer is a bit more complicated than just one thing. For all the nostalgia that I spouted about how historically relevant and formative to my childhood memories they are, the vast majority of movie games weren't good. Timelines had to coincide with film releases, often meaning that studios faced shorter development times and had a much higher likelihood of crunch, which is a bad thing. Crunch leads to higher stress levels and poorer quality output because developers are stressed and overworked. The movie games were also typically given to smaller studios, especially in those later years, so resources were already spread thin and corners had to be cut. The most notorious movie game failure of all time, E.T., highlights how those issues can impact the final product. Negotiations to make the E.T. game began in June of 1982. It was predominantly developed by one man, Howard Scott Warshaw, and had to be completed by September 1st of this same year to meet production deadlines for the holidays. That meant he only had 2 months to make this game. They even skipped audience testing because of the short time frame. The game was so bad that some hold it partially responsible for the death of Atari, and they had to haul away all the unsold copies and bury them in the New Mexico desert. That's not a joke. That actually happened. Check out the movie Atari Game Over if you don't believe me. This doesn't mean that all movie games are bad, though. There's plenty of really remarkable and even influential movie games. Difficulty aside, many people hold both Disney's Aladdin and The Lion King in high regard when it comes to platformers. Lord of the Rings: Return of the King is a very fondly remembered hack-and-slash game, beyond just the movie connections. Spider-Man 2 basically pioneered the open-world web-slinging exploration that every Spider-Man game is known for today. And GoldenEye is one of the most iconic first-person shooters of all time. Nonetheless, the average quality of movie games was pretty subpar. For a long time, though, video games were a novelty and weren't mainstream. A subpar game could still sell well based on curiosity and fewer quality titles to compare it to. But as time went on and more bangers started coming out, gaming became more mainstream and customers became pickier. Suddenly, a just okay movie game wasn't appealing when stacked up against titles like Halo, BioShock, Mario Galaxy, Mass Effect, Assassin's Creed, Red Dead Redemption, Skyrim, The Last of Us. I could do this all day. Plus, developers didn't want to be working on mediocre movie games with even more crunch than normal when they could be honing their craft, making AAA unforgettable experiences. Cost also likely played a big part in the death of movie games. Video games aren't exactly cheap to make. Even a small indie project can cost tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars if you're working with a team of developers. And that's not counting the extra costs of doing movie games like licensing fees, paying voice talent, sound design, marketing. The cost of making games only continues to increase. And as a result, so do prices, making consumers pickier and less likely to try new stuff nowadays. It just seems like a much riskier investment to make a whole-ass game just for a tie-in marketing opportunity. 2013 in particular also marked the release of the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. And new consoles means studios investing more time and money into learning the new hardware, having resources to develop for it, and potentially supporting both current and previous generations. Conversely, smartphones and tablets were on the rise, and mobile games were much cheaper to develop and faster. So Hollywood studios began pursuing mobile tie-ins more aggressively. Through that lens, it seems like a natural inflection point where development costs no longer justified big console releases, so studios pivoted to making original projects instead. I don't think any of these reasons were singularly responsible, though. It was likely a mix of them all coming together, and the timing just happening to coincide with 2012, a year everybody happened to think the world was going to end, was just a happy little accident. So if we have our answer for why movie games have been disappearing, then that just leaves the question of, where are they now? Beyond mobile tie-ins, are they gone completely? Or is there a chance that they could make a comeback? See, movie games are still around, just not in the form that they used to be. Remember back when I talked about how movie games were this unique fusion of marketing and immersive storytelling? Well, the more I look at gaming today, the more it looks like that fusion has come undone. And both film and game studios together are focusing their efforts on only one side of that coin at a time, rather than both. For direct marketing of a film, it's a lot cheaper, and potentially even holds better longevity, to just do crossovers and promotions in existing popular titles. Call of Duty sold skins of characters like Shredder and Ghostface to drum up hype for their upcoming films. Destiny 2 promoted the new Ghostbusters film with several cosmetics. Sea of Thieves did a Pirates of the Caribbean crossover. Marvel Rivals features several costumes based on the MCU movies. And who could forget the iconic Venom Free Fire collab? I feel like I'm forgetting one. Oh yeah, I feel like it needs no explanation. But Fortnite is the top dog, god king, omega ruler of this concept. The game is basically a giant billboard for all things pop culture. Because I apparently hate myself in my free time, I went through every Fortnite collab ever to see just how many movie crossovers they've done compared to other mediums. I tried to qualify this based on intention. So for franchises like Star Wars, Marvel, and DC, where they exist across several mediums, I categorized each instance based on if the skins looked directly based on the movie designs, as well as the time of the crossover coinciding with some big film release. Out of the 262 cosmetic and/or event-based crossovers as of recording this, movie tie-ins accounted for the biggest portion of collaborations at over 26%. That tells me that studios definitely see the value in promoting their properties through games like Fortnite. Now, is this a good thing? I don't know. I definitely understand the crossover fatigue that many people have been feeling lately, and constantly having a new $15 marketing toy laser beamed into my eyes starts to feel a bit dystopian after a while. But it also can be a lot of fun. It's a cool way to express yourself through personal interests, and can be absolutely hilarious getting to see these characters squad up and interact, which is exactly the type of viral positive promotion that studios are going for. I might go on a rant about how ridiculous it is that Jay and Silent Bob are in Warzone, but you could bet your sweet ass that I'm buying the Kelsier skin in Fortnite if it ever comes back into the shop, because I'm a huge Mistborn fan and I'll never forgive myself for missing that one. On the other side, we have standalone games that are tied to a film but aren't the official movie adaptation. A recent example of this is the new Dune game, Dune Awakening. It was announced back in 2022, after the first movie when hype was at a high, but before the second film. The game is set in an alternate timeline from the movies, so neither medium has direct influence on the other, but it's clear that the game pulls heavily from the aesthetic design of the films, and is meant to be viewed as a part of the larger, consolidated, modern Dune universe, or Duneverse, if you will. If you want a few other examples, look at Mad Max, Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, Jurassic World Evolution, or Alien Isolation. This approach is no doubt more expensive, which is why these games are fewer and farther between, but the trade-off is that they get to stand on their own. They've got their own vision, not tied down by the plot of a film, and more often than not, they don't have nearly the pressure to perfectly coincide with their release of the movie. If anything, the movie sells the game more than the other way around, and they can extend interest in a franchise and bring in new audiences well beyond a film's time in theaters. It's also a great way to make use of older franchises and even gauge interest in rebooting them. Games like Friday the 13th and Telltale's Back to the Future are love letters to the films that they're based on. The new Indiana Jones game is another great example, a game with its own standalone story and characters that isn't necessarily canon, but also isn't not, maybe, possibly? Who cares? It's unapologetically Indiana Jones. You get to solve puzzles, plumb ancient tombs, travel the world punching Nazis and using the trademark hat and whip, all to the tune of the classic John Williams soundtrack. Well, actually, it was Gordy Hobb that made the soundtrack, but shout out to Gordy for nailing the vibe. At this point, LEGO games are probably the closest thing that we have to a classic movie game. They are adapting the plots of films, just with their own goofy LEGO spin to it. But even LEGO is starting to deviate from just adapting films. They're doing their own thing, and even partnering with Fortnite to cram as many IPs under their next game as possible. There's a nostalgic part of me that's sad about the disappearance of movie games. Even if they aren't always incredible, at their best, they pushed film and game studios to look at these properties from different angles and approach them in new creative ways. And at their worst, they helped myself and countless other people calibrate their bad game radars while also helping us learn to have fun and appreciate games, even if they aren't 10 out of 10s. This does feel like a natural progression of movie games though, and probably is for the best. Not necessarily the $20 crossover skins, because getting directly sold overpriced cosmetics just feels yucky, but the standalone games that are genuinely good and can even breathe new life into old franchises at least provides quality entertainment and fresh new experiences. But who knows, maybe someday the classic movie game will make a comeback, and the new generation of gamers will get to have that same formative experience that I had. Or, I don't know, maybe they'll make the new Shrek 5 game in Roblox. Either way, thank you for watching. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And let me know down in the comments if you have any favorite movie game that I didn't mention. I talked about a lot of them, but there's tons more that I didn't mention. So I want to hear which ones you thought were the best. Otherwise, take care, be kind, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.